Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Get me the drum. Get me the drum. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. I'm sorry, hello? In the back there? Hare Krishna. Do you have a mask? Because you need a mask. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 8th day of March 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are starting a new chapter, chapter 9, entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge, beginning on page 373. Okay, these are set. You there? Yeah. Great. Okay. All right. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam Tute Guyatamam Travakshyami Anusuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yag Jyatva Mokshase Shubhat. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tute guhyatamam Pravakshyam yanasuyave Jnanam vijnana sahitam Yajnatva mokshase shubhat. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tute guhyatamam Pravakshyam yanasuyave Jnanam vijnana sahitam Yajnatva mokshase shubhat. Glenn, go ahead. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tute guhyatamam Pravakshyam yanasuyave Jnanam vijnana sahitam Yajnatva mokshase shubhat. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tute guhyatamam Pravakshyam yanasuyave Jnanam vijnana sahitam Yajnatva mokshase shubhat. Mike, you want to try? Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tute guhyatamam Pravakshyam yanasuyave Jnanam vijnana sahitam Yajnatva mokshase shubhat. You're welcome to try if you want. You don't have to.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm still learning.
Okay. It's hard the first time. All right, we'll go through the word by words. I'll read them. You can just read along. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Idam, this, too, but, te, unto you, guhyatamam, the most confidential, pravakshyami, I am speaking, anasuyave, to the non-envious, jnanam, knowledge, vijnana, realized knowledge, sahitam, with, yet which, jnatva, knowing, mokshase, you will be released, ashubhat, from this miserable material existence. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjun, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, the messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. Close quote. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the 1st chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now, this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, or maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anusuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on the Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain the Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is kind of one of the top 2 or 3 most essential chapters in the whole Bhagavad Gita. And this idea that it's the most confidential means that it gives the, if one carefully follows the instructions in this chapter, he will get a personal, much more personal view of Krishna. You may remember in the previous chapter, chapter 8, as I pointed out several times, Krishna sometimes goes into the 3rd person, describing Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram Anusmaranya. One should think of that Lord, it's him speaking, Krishna, but he's thinking of that Lord, who is the wisest, who is the most ancient, who is the controller of everything like that, And then he comes back to, he also says one should think of me. Andakali tamame vasmaran mukva kalevaram Yak bhyati samad bhavam yasti nachata sangshay. If one can remember me at the time of death, he will come to me. So there's certainly talk of pure devotional service in this 8th chapter. He also said, Ananya chetak satatam yoman smarati nijasha. If one can think, whoever thinks of me without deviation, I am easy to attain. So pure devotional service has been mentioned in the previous chapter along with other things. Remember at the end he's also talking about the different times one can leave the body and so forth. But this chapter is wholly and solely focused on pure devotional service. So, and this idea of being confidential, everything about Krishna consciousness is personal. In fact, much of our training in Krishna consciousness is changing how we see ourselves and see this world in personal terms. Because in our ordinary vision, there's so many things that are impersonal. Like buildings. You walk down the street and all the concrete around and everything like that. You just see it as matter. You see? But when you see with the vision of Krishna consciousness, you understand, this is the earth element. It's part of Krishna's energy. He's here through his energy. Plus, we learn that God is present in every atom and in all of our hearts. So he's all pervading. So everything becomes Krishnaized. Probably, coin that word. To Krishnaize everything. Means you as it really is. You start to see the world as it really is as an expansion of God. And therefore the divine is there in every moment. Now when we try to use the energy of God, which includes our own bodies and minds, in the service of Krishna, that's called bhakti. And then we really begin to feel the presence of the Lord in every breath, in every step. So Krishna is always personal, but we're so impersonal that to bring us to the personal stage, often is step by step. Now, but we've gone through 8 chapters already, so now this is the most confidential knowledge, which is simply about pure devotional service. So now, Prabhupada mentions the 9 processes of devotion, right? He talks about knowledge. This knowledge is the most confidential. So we get 2 things here, Gyara and Vigna. These terms are very close, obviously, but there's an important distinction. Gyana means I understand that I'm a soul, the spirit soul. Vijnana means it's not just I understand theoretically, but I live in that consciousness, I act spiritually, and so I realize it every moment. That's Vijnana. And it's probably sometimes called Vijnana, scientific understanding, direct perception. It's the difference between understanding that there's a place called Bhutan. Have you ever heard of there's a little country near India called Bhutan? They have the distinction of having produced the hugest book, physical book. I read one little article. I think the book is all about Bhutan, and it's like 25 feet wide, and you need 3 guys to turn the pages. They thought this would be, who knew that, So now you know that about Bhutan. But if you actually go there and you see Bhutan and you see that book, that's Vijnana. One is knowing the facts, the other is actually experiencing. So this chapter will help us not only know about Krishna, but also experience Krishna. And Prabhupada explains in this purport, and this is just a taste, the next purport is really rich. It goes on and on for 6 pages, and it was written as a separate essay and included in this book. So we can look forward to that. We'll get to the second verse tonight also. Now in the 1, 2, 3rd, 4th paragraph, Prabhupada talks about the 9 different processes of devotional service. Now this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities. Now Prabhupada lists them, hearing, chanting. But what's understood, hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna, remembering Krishna, serving Krishna, worshiping God. In other words, the whole idea is that these processes are focused on hearing from the proper source. Very key. Someone who is a believer. Someone who is an actual devotee. Not some academic or speculator or something like that. Because you can study bhakti as part of a world religious course in the university. But you're not going to become a bhakta. You may get an A in the course, you know the facts, you may know some more Sanskrit, a lot more Sanskrit than I know. But if your heart isn't there, if you don't believe, if you aren't practicing, then Krishna from within, because it's very important to realize that All of this depends on Krishna's revelation from the heart. You can't storm the, gates of heaven and find out who is God. He reserves the right of being invisible. And the way he does that is he covers your heart. You don't believe. If you don't have any faith, then why will you hear about God and serve God and chant God? You're not going to do it. So that's why the contact with the devotee of God is so important, and preferably a pure devotee. Because after all, this is all invisible. We can't see the spirit. We can't even see our own spirit soul in our present condition. What to speak of God, the Supreme Spirit. So how are we going to do those things that will help us to get that revelation? For that we need someone to impart in us the faith. Just like Bhutan. If I'm a representative of Bhutan, coming to try to get tourists to come, then I'll bring the videos and I'll say, oh, it's the most heavenly place. I've lived there for several years, and we have a special on the air, you know what I mean? In other words, try to increase your desire to actually go there, and you have to have faith that there really is such a place, and that I'll have a good time and so forth. So it's faith. Then you invest your money, you invest your time and energy. So meeting someone who is a pure devotee, who's actually seen the truth, tattva-darshi. This is mentioned in the 4th chapter. Tadvidi paripatena parivrashnena seve upadekshanti degem jnaninas tattva-darshinaha. One has to approach a pure devotee, and through service and surrender and inquiry, he reveals the knowledge to you, because he's seen it. The point is, he's come back from Bhutan. He knows it's a place. He can increase your faith. But forget Bhutan. He's seen Goloka Vrindavan, the spiritual world. So he can actually impart faith into you. It's real. Now follow me. You do this, chant, and you hear, chanting about Krishna, hearing about Krishna, and remembering. Those are the foundation of the others. All the others are also important. So what happens is, as Prabhupada says, the heart becomes cleared. It's just like we're walking around with. I wear these glasses, obviously, because I can't see so well. So, I don't know if you had the experience I have. I have flip-ups, the sunglasses. So sometimes, the other day I had them on because I drive, and the sun is too much, and then when I go with shopping, I take them, flip them up. So I forgot to flip them up, and everything looked dark. I said, what's going on? So imagine that you're wearing those, and you're always wearing, and you don't know that you're wearing them. Forever. So we're all walking around with blinders. We can't actually see the reality. We can't see that spirit is real, that we ourselves are consciousness. We're thinking that we're this body, because that's all we know. We don't have any other frame of reference. So we identify ourselves as a particular body. But the first lesson in Bhagavad Gita is that, no, you're not the body. The body you have now is just a temporary covering for your spirit soul. And that even in this one lifetime, we can understand we've changed so many bodies. We were all once 8 years old. We can probably remember. I can remember a bunch of stuff from 8, not it. So I was actually there. My mind was different. My body was different, obviously. But I was the same person. And now, at 70 plus, I'm still the same person. But my body has changed. And eventually, the body has to give out. It's just a complicated machine. But we never die. I have this little mantra. Every body dies. Everybody dies. Nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. The whole philosophy is there, kind of, But that's from a verse. Krishna says in the 2nd chapter, Antabanta hime deha nitya sokta sharirina. Antabanta means coming to an end. Temporary. Deha, this body and all bodies. Everything material must come to an end. This building, this body, this whole earth, it's all has a time frame. It might be 20 more years, it might be 10 million more years, but at a certain point it dissolves into its constituents. The body may die, but it turns into earth and everything, the body that it's made of, those are the constituents. But as a body, it no longer exists, right? But you, the spirit soul, very minute, but very powerful and indestructible, you will continue. And not only that, but your mind will continue, your subtle body, and what you've thought about, your thoughts, and how you've cultivated. Krishna Prabhupada talks about that here. That will determine your next life. So therefore, the process of yoga, real bhakti yoga, is using the facilities we have, all the senses, our mind, intelligence, to create a consciousness so that when we leave this body, it'll be pure Krishna consciousness and full of desire to stay connected to Krishna through loving service. And then we don't have to take a material body anymore. No more death, literally. No more birth, no more old age, no more disease. That's the goal of human life. And this chapter will be very explicit in how we can achieve that. Okay, now one very important Prabhupada mentioned before we move on to the next verse. The Sanskrit word anusuyave in this verse is also very significant. Who remembers what that means? Alex, you've been studying Sanskrit for 5 years. Do you remember what anasuya means? Yeah, it's non-envious. You know Prabhupada's daughter's name? Anasuya. That's why he knows this word. The leader here has a son and a daughter. And her name is Anasuya. She's a professional in a big corporation now. But when I came here, the Gurukul was next door. And she was in the Gurukul. That's how long I've been here. So, what does it mean? It means non-envious. Envious here has several meanings, more than what we normally think. It's not only that we're envious because someone has more money than us, or is more beautiful than us, or something like that, but also means it has the added meaning of bearing malice toward. You'll find this in the Oxford English Dictionary. Srila Prabhupada learned English at near the beginning of the 20th century in India, and it was English, which has distinct differences from American English. Like the word sufficient. Sufficient means enough. What else could it mean? It can also mean abundant in Oxford English. So this word envy can mean what we normally think, jealous of someone, or it can also mean bear malice toward. And we kind of have that. When we come to this world, we've been in the spiritual world, but we wanted to try to imitate Krishna, to try to become the lords and masters and prime enjoyers, rather than the servants of God. And so we turn our back, and we forget. We focus on this material energy, which is also his realm, but he's not here personally. And this is our field of exploitation. But each time we try that, in each form we have, and it's not always a human form. There's lower forms. We've all seen cats and dogs and insects. When I take my walk, I have a flashlight because I walk at night, and I have to watch out because there's little bugs. There's a lot of crickets in this area, and sometimes they're hopping along, and I have to try to avoid them, But that cricket is as much a spirit soul as we are, but the consciousness is much more constricted. They can't understand Bhagavad Gita. So we come here to try to exploit. We're envious of Krishna's position. He's the supreme enjoyer. He's God, and we also want to be little gods. But that's not our constitutional position. That's our natural position. And so we keep failing. And let's try as hard as we can. We end up getting old and not being able to enjoy, and then dying, and then getting born again, and go up and become up the species till we get to human form. So the human form of life is a very rare and wonderful opportunity to break out of the bonds of birth and death. And so we need to give up this envy of Krishna, all kinds of envy. And Krishna says, I'm speaking this to you, Arjun, because you're non-envious of me. And so we also have an opportunity to hear. And if we receive the knowledge in the right spirit, and we'll really benefit. So let's go on, unless there are comments, either locally or remotely, or questions about this verse. This whole chapter is very rich. The whole chapter can be memorized. But especially this next verse is very famous. Okay, off we go. Text 2. Rajavidya Rajaguyam Pavatram idamuttamam Pratyakshaavagamam dhamyam Susukham kartumabhyayam. Before we go on, you remember I told you that word abhyayam is the most common use? Here again it appears. You'll see it. Avyayam means an everlasting, never destroyed. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. Purport. Now we may break this up, this long purport, because it's so rich. This chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is called the King of Education because it is the essence of all doctrines and philosophies explained before. Among the principal philosophers in India are Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Yagyavalkya, Shandilya, and Vaishvanara. And finally there is Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra. So there is no dearth of knowledge in the field of philosophy or transcendental knowledge. Now the Lord says in this ninth chapter, that this ninth chapter is the king of all such knowledge, the essence of all knowledge that can be derived from the study of the Vedas and different kinds of philosophy. It is the most confidential because confidential or transcendental knowledge involves understanding the difference between the soul and the body. And the king of all confidential knowledge culminates in devotional service. Generally, people are not educated in this confidential knowledge. They are educated in external knowledge. As far as ordinary education is concerned, people are involved with so many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, etc. There are so many departments of knowledge all over the world, and many huge universities. But there is, unfortunately, no university or educational institution where the science of the spirit soul is instructed. Yet the soul is the most important part of the body. Without the presence of the soul, the body has no value. Still, people are placing great stress on the bodily necessities of life, not caring for the vital soul. The Bhagavad Gita, especially from the second chapter on, stresses the importance of the soul. In the very beginning, the Lord says that this body is perishable and that the soul is not perishable. Here's that verse I just quoted. Andabanda hime deha nityasyokta sharirinaha. That is a confidential part of knowledge, simply knowing that the spirit soul is different from this body and that its nature is immutable, indestructible, and eternal. But that gives no positive information about the soul. Sometimes people are under the impression that the soul is different from the body and that when the body is finished or one is liberated from the body, the soul remains in a void and becomes impersonal. But actually, that is not the fact. How can the soul, which is so active within this body, be inactive after being liberated from the body? It is always active. If it is eternal, then it is eternally active, and its activities in the spiritual kingdom are the most confidential part of spiritual knowledge. These activities of the spirit soul are therefore indicated here as constituting the king of all knowledge, the most confidential part of all knowledge. This knowledge is the purest form of all activities, as explained in Vedic literature. In the Padma Purana, man's sinful activities have been analyzed and are shown to be the results of sin after sin. Those who are engaged in fruitive activities are entangled in different stages and forms of sinful reactions. For instance, when the seed of a particular tree is sown, the tree does not appear immediately to grow. It takes some time. It is first a small sprouting plant, then it assumes the form of a tree, then it flowers and bears fruit. And when it is complete, the flowers and fruits are enjoyed by persons who have sown the seed of the tree. Similarly, a person, performs a sinful act, and like a seed, it takes time to fructify. There are different stages. The sinful actions may have already stopped within the individual, but the results or the fruit of that sinful action are still to be enjoyed, or let's say, experienced, because there's suffering there. There are sins which are still in the form of seed, and there are others which are already fructified and are giving us fruit which we are enjoying or we are experiencing as distress and pain. As explained in the 28th verse of the 7th chapter, a person who has completely ended the reactions of all sinful activities and who is fully engaged in pious activities, being freed from the duality of this material world, becomes engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, those who are actually engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord are already freed from all reactions. This statement is confirmed in Padma Puran, Aparabdha Palam Papam Kutam Bijam Palonmukam. Kramenaiva praliyeta Vishnu bhakti vatatmanam. For those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all sinful reactions, whether fructified in stock or in the form of a seed, gradually vanish. Therefore, the purifying potency of devotional service is very strong, and it is called Pavitram Uttamam, the purest. Uttama means transcendental. Tamas means the material world or darkness, and Uttama means that which is transcendental to material activities. Devotional activities are never to be considered material, although sometimes it appears that devotees are engaged just like ordinary men. One who can see and is familiar with devotional service will know that they are not material activities. They are all spiritual and devotional, uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. Okay, we're going to stop there and explore this purport. Maybe we'll finish it tonight, the rest of it. So, first of all, Prabhupada lists the different doctrines, some of the leaders. I can't give you what all the details of the philosophy are. Kapila here refers, I think, to the impersonal Kapila. There's two Kapilas, one who preached Sankhya, without God, and then there's Kapila Muni, of course, in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But whatever they are, there are different varieties of sometimes materialism with some spirit involved. But finally there is Vyasadeva who wrote the Vedanta Sutra. Now the meaning of Vedanta Sutra is a little aphorism, a little saying, such as Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Notice that these verses are a little longer. So Atato Brahma Jigyasa means now, having come to the human form of life, one should inquire into the absolute truth. Absolute truth, which is defined in the next sutra, or aphorism, Janma Jasya Yataha. That which is the source of everything, and the Adi, etc. The etc. means the source of everything, that which sustains everything, and ultimately that which destroys everything. That's what you should inquire into. Then you'll be inquiring into the absolute truth. So these Vedanta Sutras, they need explanation, and there are commentaries. But the Vedanta Sutra goes on, there's many of these sutras, and it has the essence of Vedic wisdom in this Vedanta Sutra. But they need explanation, because like anyone hears the Atato Brahma Jigyasa, you say, well, okay, what does that mean? And then you have to have a whole sentence or a paragraph describing it. So obviously it needs commentary. So after writing the Vedanta Sutra and many other literatures, Vyasadeva, who's this great sage of Vedic times, he was dissatisfied. Even this Bhagavad Gita he'd written in a larger work called the Mahabharata. But he said, I'm missing something. I didn't, give everything needed. And so his spiritual master came, this great sage called Narada Muni. There's a whole story about him. But he's a great devotee who goes around and inspires others to take up devotional service. So he was Vyasadeva's spiritual master, his guru. And he explained to him, that's because you haven't written anything that's wholly and solely about devotional service, the most confidential knowledge. You've woven it in a little bit, but it's not. That's why you're dissatisfied. And so he wrote one more book. It's called the Srimad Bhagavatam, or Bhagavad Purana. And that's the book we study in the morning. If you come in the morning at 10 to 8, you can hear another class on that much larger work. And we're now about 1/4 of the way through it, after many, many months, which deals with expanded themes that you find in the Bhagavad Gita. But it comes to the same thing. So the Vedanta Sutra, which means the aphorism explaining the ultimate knowledge, that's Vyasadeva. So there's no dearth of knowledge. So here he's saying that this chapter that we're studying is the king of all knowledge. You're going to get the essence of it right here. Raja Vidya means king of knowledge. So we're studying it. And then he talks about, different kinds of knowledge that exist, but it's all varieties of material knowledge. Where do you go to find? Prabhupada went to our spiritual master went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, world renowned, And so they asked him to, give a talk, so he did. He said, what is the department here in this institute that deals with the difference between a dead body and a living body? Nobody could answer. Because that's the spirit soul. They don't have any department dealing with the spiritual matters. It's all technology, how to manipulate, very skillfully. So that's the problem. with all of this education, they're not learning about the most essential knowledge. Who am I? Why is there so much suffering in this world? Why do we have to die? Is there life after death? Is there God? If so, how do I know him like that? Those questions are put off. And they're derided. We don't need to know. We're just going to manipulate this world, as we're doing so nicely. So many computers and so much. But look at the world. It's. I wouldn't say that the happiness quotient has increased over the last year. People are all freaked out by this COVID. Why don't they have? Why aren't they able to solve the problem? Because that's what this world is all about. There's different kinds of miseries that must come. They're built into the system. Just like old age, disease, and death. You got two choices. You can die untimely, or you can grow old and disease and die. Take your choice. Well, I'm not going to think about that right now. I got so many things I got to do. I got to pay my rent. But that's the main problem. And people think that there's no solution, therefore what's the point of thinking about it? That's just life. No, that's what the Vedic wisdom says. No, there is a solution. You can escape from birth and death. We have these things called the Threefold Miseries. We all know what they are. This is the name, miseries caused by the nature. The thing happened in Texas, everyone knows. They didn't plan properly. They said, it doesn't get that cold down here. Yeah, now with climate change, it does. Now it got down to zero, and then the electricity ran off. People died from the cold. How would you like to get your bill for the last month during this cold, and it's $16,000? Yes, because of the system they have over there. Because it became so Anyway, that in itself is a misery. On top of the misery of having the cold, and then you go. And of course, most of the time, I have that. Most of the people, that's just taken out of your bank account automatically, right? They just took the poor guy's out of his bank account. $17,000 for 1 month. Misery on top of misery. So how do I get rid of all of it? Not how do I just counteract one misery and cause another misery. Like pharmaceuticals. A friend of mine had a sister who was associated with the temple in Tennessee. We have this farm community there. This was years ago. And as sometimes happens, as you may know, Tylenol can be poisonous if you take too much. So she had some pain, taking, liver failure. Died at 30 years old. Horrible. Things happen like that all the time. That's this material world. And it's so wonderful to learn we don't have to be here. This is not the only life we have. We live forever. We've had lives before and we'll have lives again. Now the question is, how can we act in this life so we get the next best birth? The best next birth. And that will be one that's not in a human body or any body. As soon as you take a body of matter, that means you have to face these miseries caused by nature, caused by other beings. It has Adi Bautic is called. A lot of times it's human beings who cause us misery. And then there's our own body and mind. We can be sitting in Pacific Beach, weather is perfect, 72 degrees, we're two blocks from the beach, everything is fine, nobody's causing us any trouble, but inside my mind, I've got so much distress, why did that happen to me? Your own body and mind can give you problems. So those threefold miseries are always threatening, or they're on top of us, or we're afraid they're going to happen. And this is all part of material life. How to get out of it? Is there a solution to the whole problem? Not just some mitigation of symptoms. And that's what we find in this Bhagavad Gita, the essence of knowledge. This is what we really need. So then Prabhupada says, what's confidential? The second chapter deals with the spirit, but the most confidential is that which deals with pure devotional service to God. Hooking and connecting us again to loving devotional service to God. And we've been through so many chapters. I like to hearken back to this verse. This is kind of my theme song these days. 5th chapter. Krishna says, Yehi sangspar jajab bhoga dukayona evate adyantavanta konteyana teshu ramate buddha. Recognize? This is a very simple verse. He says, the pleasures that you get from the contact of the senses with the sense objects, okay, and that includes the mind. The mind is also a sixth sense, so you cannot be doing anything, just watching TV, and there's a whole lot of pleasure going on there. He says those pleasures are sources of misery, and they have a beginning and an end, and they're the wise therefore do not delight in them. So then the next question of the inquiry is, well then how am I going to enjoy? That's the previous verse. Bayasparshe sasaktatma vindajatmana yat sukham yab sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. Says the wise bayasparsheshu asaktatma, they're not attracted to this contact of the senses with the sense objects. They are always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In other words, we're walking around with Krishna in our heart, and he's a reservoir of pleasure. That pleasure comes from, first of all, being conscious of him and engaging in these 9 processes that we learned: hearing, chanting, serving. If you stay, you'll see the deity form, contemplating. So, sab brahma yoga yuktatma, always linked up to the Brahman. Brahman means the pure spirit, Krishna's supreme spirit, Para Brahman. Yoga yukta sukham akshayam ashnute. Now that last line is key. And thus, that person, that yogi, that bhakti yogi, enjoys unbreakable happiness. And in other places we learn it's not only unbreakable, but it's ever increasing. Where do you find that on this plane? No, flickering sense gratification is not what we're talking about here. That's the source of our misery. So, but if you don't know any other source of happiness, then you have to go for sense gratification. We've been in that ignorance since time immemorial. Now, in the human form of life, we can break out of it. And the key? Very simple. It's right there. Chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's Krishna's gift to us through the agency of Lord Chaitanya, as Lord Chaitanya. This mantra is the key. But as soon as you chant, the great sages have told us, you're in touch with God through the sound vibration. And if you keep doing it, you do it properly under your rules and regulations, you'll gradually feel that spiritual pleasure. And it doesn't have to end. No one is ever going to tell you in this Hare Krishna temple. This is why I joined. I was going to other yoga studios. This goes back to the early 70s. And I was chanting. And then I would go there and I would chant. And okay, now it's time to stop chanting. And we're going to do exercises now. Okay. So finally, I said, I want to go to that place where they never tell you to stop chanting, and that's the Hare Krishna temple. No one will ever tell you to stop chanting here. They'll say, chant. So the chanting is the key yoga process. Now, Prabhupada talks about this idea of sin. Sin simply means activities against the laws of nature and against the laws of God. They're synonymous. We're naturally servants of God. When we do things against our nature that decrease or obliterate, at least temporarily, that sense of service, and we start serving the senses or serving other things here in this material world, then we're bound to perform sin. There's one incarnation of Krishna named Rishabdev who gives a very, very nice explanation of that. Nunam pramatta kurate vikarma Yarindriya Pritaya Apanoti. Indriya Priti exactly translates the Sanskrit into sense gratification. So it says, certainly those who are simply absorbed in sense gratification are mad, because by that activity they're sure to get a material body and sure to increase their suffering. So how do we learn how to act in this world so that we're not only are we not performing sin against the laws of God, but we're eradicating sinful reactions. There's this idea of sinful reaction. It's very, very understandable. Forget about last birth, future birth. Just think of this birth. We know that if we try to engage in extreme sense activity. Let's just give the example because it's a great example and something we all know. Drugs. I grew up in the 60s, so I'm not, I was a total atheist for a long time. And I got involved in not heavy drugs, thank God, but I was smoking a lot of marijuana, which was a whole different species than what they have today. It was a lot weaker in the 60s, believe me. But still, getting high. But you always have to come down. So now, luckily, I didn't. I never got into heavy drugs, which can do permanent damage. I may have done some damage, but not powerful. But I was fortunate, or good karma. If I had moved in different circles, I would have gotten into hallucinogens and maybe then amphetamines. Who knows? Methamphetamines. I mean, I'm living in New York. I could have easily gotten into heroin, if I was really stupid. But Krishna protected me. But the point is, one thing leads to another. If you don't have this knowledge, you try to enjoy in a certain way, and you can completely damage your life and create tremendous pain and suffering. So that's karma. You take your first toke. We used to call them tokes. I don't know if they still call them tokes. Oh, this is great. Your first drink. Oh, now I'm enjoying. But then 10 years later, 20 years later, you're an alcoholic. You've done damage to your brain. A friend of mine came by the other day. Who was it who sent him here? I think Ramapati saw him. And the poor guy, even when he was here 10 years ago, he had already taken so much cocaine. He liked my classes, so we would come to class, but he couldn't sit for more than 10 minutes. Yeah, he just was so restless. He'd get up, he'd leave, and come back and sit down. And now 10 years later, the poor guy had driven here, but he forgot where he parked his car. He showed me the keys. I don't know what to do. He thought that his friend had parked it for him. Then he said, no, actually, I don't think he did, I'm getting Alzheimer's, Dravida. No, you just, wrecked your brain with too much drugs. How much suffering? That's karma. You don't have to worry about next life. This life. We'll see the result. You act in a certain way. On the other hand, there are mode of goodness activities on the material side. If you take care of yourself, you eat healthy, you avoid bad association, then you can be more happy even on the material plane. So that's good karma. Like every mother and father know that at a certain point they're going to have to take their kid to school. Prabhupada told that he didn't want to go. He just wanted to keep playing all day. At 5 or 6, who wants to go to school? Nobody, right? But the parents know, this is for the child's better in the future. So there's a system of education. The kids don't know, but the higher authorities know. And eventually you get accustomed to it and you go, undertaking. Because in the future you'll have a good life, right? So this idea of what you do now has ramifications in your future. We experience that in our daily life. So now just carry it over with this understanding that we never die. We just go on to a next birth. And that according to our consciousness that we've cultivated in this life, that's going to be our future. And that includes all our activities. As soon as you enjoy something, you plant a seed, you want to enjoy it again and again and again. I was a total chocolate addict when I was a kid, I mean, it wasn't disease causing, but I just loved chocolate. I said, I don't know if they have anymore chocolate kisses, the little things that, chocolate this, chocolate that. All right, fine. Eventually I got out of that, But the point is, you carry these things with you. You plant a desire seed, and it goes on. And if you're performing sinful activity, then you're due to suffer. Especially if you hurt others in order to get something pleasurable. That's horrible. The pure spirit soul, child of God from the spiritual world, becomes so degraded and covered by contact with this material world that he turns into a Hitler or something like that. No feeling, sociopathic. That can happen. It's disease form in the spirit. So we don't want to risk that. Now we have a system by which we, as Prabhupada says, you become more and more purified, and of what? Of these material tendencies and of sinful reactions, and you can become very peaceful even in this world and make progress on your way back to Godhead, to the world of eternal bliss and knowledge. Okay, I've kind of carried on, and now it's almost time to quit. Dhanavari? No
Hare
question.
Krishna, Prabhu.
I'm sorry, I went so long, I forgot. You should have interrupted me.
No, you answered all the questions. Very, very nice
okay.
explanation.
All right.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
So we'll resume tomorrow in the middle of this purport, which I think is in the middle of page 377. And you're all welcome. There's no free admission charge. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.